Many people think poverty is just a lack of money. I believe that is wrong. At the practical level, poverty is not just a number in a bank account. Poverty behaves like a gravitational force. It is a trap. It is a closed loop system that keeps people inside, spinning their wheels until they run out of energy. In my view of it, as the physics of poverty, if you reduce it, if you want to understand why people stay stuck, you are going to have to understand rocket science. In practical terms, when a rocket tries to leave the Earth, it fights gravity. To reach orbit, it must hit a specific speed. We call that escape velocity. If the rocket uses almost all of the fuel but still misses that speed, it does not get 99% of the way to the moon. It falls back to Earth and crashes. To put it plainly, that is exactly what happens to a great many working people. As I see it, you work hard in financial life, you save a little money. Put simply, you try to climb out of the hole. If you strip it down, you get halfway up the wall, looked at soberly, then something happens. Look at the mechanics. The car breaks down. In ordinary life, you get sick. Under that view, the rent goes up under pressure. Gravity kicks in, seen clearly, and because you never reached escape velocity, you fall all the way back to the bottom. Seen up close. In truth, you often fall lower than before, because now you are discouraged, tired, and carrying even less fuel. In the real world, this is why working a little harder often does not work. At the working level, inside the physics of poverty, linear effort can produce no lasting result. To break the gravitational pull, you need far more force than most people imagine. That is not because of a conspiracy, it is because of mathematics. If you look closely, poverty is expensive. In truth, when you are poor, almost everything costs more. At a practical level, you cannot buy in bulk, so you pay a higher unit price for food. As a practical matter, you cannot afford good boots, so you buy cheap boots that break every year. From that angle, you cannot afford the dentist while the problem is still small, so you wait until the tooth rots and the bill becomes far larger. If we are honest, this is what people mean when they talk about the boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. At the center of it, a rich man can buy one pair of high-quality boots for $50 and wear them for 10 years. At bottom, a poor man only has $10, so he buys the cheap pair. In simple terms, the cheap pair falls apart after 1 year, so he buys another pair the next year and another pair the year after that. At the household level, over 10 years. Working class households man spends $100. By that logic, the rich man spent $50. Stated another way, the poor man spent twice as much money, and his feet were wet the entire time. When you look at it directly, that is the mathematics of being poor. Seen from the ground, the system charges you a penalty for lacking capital. Plainly, it charges late fees. Practically speaking, it charges overdraft fees. In that light, it charges high interest rates. From there, it charges you a premium because you are perceived as a risk. In real life, so you are running a race with a heavy backpack, while affluent households are running with the wind at their backs. From my perspective, and the most dangerous part is this: in daily life, poverty is not only external, in concrete terms, it becomes internal. Look at it honestly. When you stay trapped in this loop for too long, it changes the way your brain works. It puts you into constant fight or flight mode. You stop planning for 10 years from now and start worrying about 10 minutes from now. You become reactive instead of proactive. At the practical level, that is the poverty cycle. If you reduce it, low income leads to stress. In practical terms, stress leads to bad decisions. To put it plainly, bad decisions lead to no assets. As I see it, no assets lead back to low income. In financial life, round and round it goes. Put simply, a perfect vicious circle. If you strip it down, but there is a way out, looked at soberly, the laws of physics can be broken if enough force is applied in the right direction. Look at the mechanics. To escape, you need to understand the 5 chains holding you down. In ordinary life, the scarcity tax that drains your brain. Under that view, the dopamine trap that steals your cash. Under pressure, the linear income trap that wastes your time. Seen clearly, the social gravity that pulls you back into the bucket. Seen up close, and the compound void that keeps you standing on the wrong side of the engine of wealth. In the real world, once you break orbit, everything changes. At the working level, the friction falls away. If you look closely, the silence comes. In truth, you can finally move. At a practical level, but first you need to survive the launch. As a practical matter, the first loop is the scarcity tax from that angle. Most people think that if you simply hand a poor person money, the problem is solved. If we are honest, sometimes it helps. At the center of it, often it does not solve the structure at bottom. And that is why lottery winners can receive millions and still be broke again in a few years. In simple terms, poverty is not just a lack of cash at the household level, it is a lack of cognitive bandwidth. By that logic, when your mind is consumed by financial stress, your processor is damaged. You are trying to solve long-term problems with a brain stuck in survival mode. You cannot see far into the future because you are too busy fighting the present. Stated another way, that is the scarcity trap. When you look at it directly, when your bandwidth is limited, your decisions become worse. Seen from the ground, you take the high-interest payday loan because you need cash now. Plainly, you buy the unhealthy food because it is cheap and fast now. Practically speaking, it is not always stupidity. In that light, very often it is exhaustion from there. And the system knows how to exploit exhaustion. In real life, this is why the first move is so plain. From my perspective, build an emergency reserve. In daily life, your first financial goal is not to get rich. In concrete terms, it is not to buy a house. Looked at it honestly, it is not to invest in the stock market. At the practical level, your only goal at first is to save $1,000, or even $500, if that is where you really have to begin. If you reduce it, put it in a separate account and still do not touch it. In practical terms, that money is not for spending. To put it plainly, it is for buying back your brain. As I see it, when you have a reserve, the car breaking down becomes an inconvenience instead of a disaster. In financial life, when you have a cash cushion, you plainly do not have to take the payday loan. Put simply, you stop paying the scarcity tax on every emergency. If you strip it down, you stop reacting to every disruption and start managing it. Looked at soberly, that $1,000 buys something more valuable than gold. Look at the mechanics, it buys cognitive bandwidth. In ordinary life, it gives you back sleep. Under that view, it lets you look up from the ground and finally see the horizon. Under pressure, most people try to jump straight to investing. Seen clearly, that is a mistake. Seen up close, they are trying to build a skyscraper on a swamp. In the real world, you have to drain the swamp first. At the working level, you have to build the emergency reserve first. If you look closely, you have to buy the boots that last 10 years first. In truth, yes, it requires sacrifice. At a practical level, yes, it requires pain for a few months. As a practical matter, you may have to live like a monk for a while, from that angle, but you are doing it for a reason. If we are honest, you are buying your freedom from the scarcity tax. At the center of it, the second loop is the dopamine trap. At bottom, this is the emotional one. In simple terms, people say, if you are poor, why do you have the newest phone? Why do you eat out when you have groceries at home? Why do you buy expensive sneakers? At the household level, it is easy to judge from the outside. By that logic, it is harder to understand the biology. Stated another way, when you are trapped in the poverty cycle, life hurts. Your stress is constantly high. You feel small. You feel invisible. Your brain is screaming for relief. It is screaming for a win. When you look at it directly. So when you walk into a store and buy the new pair of shoes or the branded handbag, your brain releases dopamine. For a few minutes, the pain goes away. For a few minutes, you feel successful. For a few minutes, you feel like you matter seen from the ground. That is not ordinary spending. Plainly, that is self-medication. Practically speaking, you are using consumption as an anesthetic to numb the pain of your reality. In that light. But that is the trap. From there, the relief is temporary. In real life, the debt is not. From my perspective, the dopamine fades in 20 minutes. In daily life, the credit card bill can last for years. In concrete terms, that is one of the fundamental differences between how poor households and wealthier households often use money. Look at it honestly, the poor often see money as a way to buy relief or pleasure. At the practical level, the rich are more likely to see money as a way to buy optionality. If you reduce it, when a poor person gets $500, he often asks what he can buy with it. In practical terms, when a rich person gets $500, he is more likely to ask how he can invest it. To put it plainly, this is assets versus liabilities. As I see it, an asset puts money in your pocket. In financial life, a liability takes money out. Put simply, if you buy a designer purse, that is a liability. If you strip it down, if you buy a share of stock, that is an asset. Looked at soberly, it keeps working while you sleep. Look at the mechanics. Most people in the low-income trap are drowning in liabilities. In ordinary life, they have the nice car. Under that view, the nice clothes, under pressure, the subscriptions, seen clearly the gadgets, seen up close, they look rich. In the real world, but they are bleeding wealth every day. At the working level, they are feeding the dopamine monster while starving their future. If you look closely, so how do you break this loop? In truth, you need a detox. A practical level, you need monk mode. As a practical matter, not forever. From that angle, a temporary reset. If we are honest, for a period of time, you cut everything. At the center of it, you cancel what is unnecessary. At bottom, you stop eating out. In simple terms, you stop buying clothes. At the household level, you stop paying for little emotional rewards. By that logic, you strip life down to food, shelter, and basic transport. Stated another way, it will be boring. When you look at it directly, it will be hard. Seen from the ground, people may laugh at you plainly, but you are going to have to tell yourself the truth. Practically speaking, I am not poor. In that light, I am in training. From there, when you stop getting dopamine from spending, your brain starts to rewire itself. You begin finding satisfaction in seeing the bank account grow. You begin getting a different kind of dopamine, the dopamine of control. In real life, once you realize you plainly do not need the new phone to feel alive, you become, from my perspective, you become free. In daily life, because the system can no longer manipulate you with shiny objects. In concrete terms, you have broken the addiction. Look at it honestly. The third loop is the linear income trap. At the practical level, most people are taught a simple equation. If you reduce it, time equals money. In practical terms, if you want more money, work more hours. To put it plainly, get the second job. As I see it, work overtime. In financial life, drive Uber on the weekends, put simply. But there is a fatal flaw in that equation. If you strip it down, time is finite. Looked at soberly, you only have 24 hours in a day, and your body has limits. Look at the mechanics. That means your income is mathematically capped. In ordinary life, your expenses are not under that view. This brings us to one of the silent killers of the working class. Under pressure, inflation. Seen clearly, inflation is a tax on people who sell their time. Seen up close. When money is printed and prices rise, bread costs more and gas costs more. But wages simply do not adjust immediately. Wages are sticky. Your boss may wait a year or two before giving you a 3% raise. And by then, inflation may already have eaten far more than that in the real world. So you are running up a down escalator. At the working level, you work harder. If you look closely, you miss your child's birthday. In truth, you damage your health. At a practical level. And at the end of the year, you can be poorer than when you started. As a practical matter, you cannot win that game simply by playing harder. From that angle, you have to change the game. If we are honest, you have to stop selling time alone and start selling value. At the center of it, that is how you build a skill stack. At bottom, most people try to become the best at one crowded thing. In simple terms, that is hard and crowded. At the household level, a better move is often to become pretty good at 2 or 3 unrelated skills and combine them. By that logic, that is how someone like Scott Adams became unique. He was not the best artist, not the funniest writer, not the best businessman, but he was good at all 3, and the combination made him unusual. Stated another way, if you are a low-income worker, do not really just get a second job flipping burgers. When you look at it directly, that is more linear income. Seen from the ground, use your monk mode time to learn a second skill. Plainly, if you work construction, learn sales. Practically speaking, now you are not just labor. In that light, you are a contractor who can close deals. From there, if you are a waiter, learn copywriting. In real life. Now you are not only carrying food. From my perspective, you can also design menus that sell high-margin items. In daily life, you must become a double threat. In concrete terms, when you stack skills, you detach your income from your hours. Look at it honestly, you become harder to replace. At the practical level, you become an asset rather than a commodity. If you reduce it, the market pays for rarity more reliably than it pays for effort. In practical terms, if you can be replaced by a teenager or a robot in a week, you will remain vulnerable. To put it plainly, you have to build a moat around your income. As I see it, that moat is your skill stack. In financial life, the 4th loop is social gravity. Put simply, this may be the hardest chain to break. If you strip it down, there is an old saying that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Looked at soberly, there is a lot of truth in that. Look at the mechanics. If your closest friends are broke, cynical, and unambitious, that environment will shape you. In ordinary life, human beings are imitation machines. We copy the language, behavior, and mindset of the tribe around us. Under that view, so if you are trying to escape poverty while surrounded by people who have accepted poverty, you are fighting a very hard battle, under pressure. That is exactly why the crab bucket image matters. Seen clearly, put 1 crab in a bucket, and it may crawl out. Seen up close, put 10 crabs in the same bucket, and when one tries to escape, the others pull it back down. In the real world, they plainly do not do it because they are all evil. At the working level, they do it because your success makes them feel unsafe. If you look closely, your escape highlights their imprisonment. In truth, when you start monk mode, when you start saving money, when you start learning new skills, your old friends may not applaud. At a practical level, they may attack. As a practical matter, they may tell you to relax. From that angle, they may say you think you are better than them. If we are honest, they may say the game is rigged. So why bother? At center of it, that is the sound of social gravity. At bottom, that is the bucket trying to keep you inside. In simple terms, so you must protect your mind. At household level, I am not saying you are going to have to be cruel to the people you love. By that logic, I am saying you cannot let poisonous inputs occupy your whole day. Stated another way, when you look at it directly, and because you live in the age of the internet, that tribe does not have to live next door, seen from the ground. You can spend your time with better minds through books, interviews, biographies, and lectures. Plainly, you can read Munger, practically speaking, you can read Einstein. In that light, you can read the greatest builders in history. From there, when you do that, you are downloading a new operating system into your brain. In real life, you are choosing better standards. From my perspective, you are choosing better mirror neurons. In daily life, a new mental neighborhood often comes before a new physical neighborhood. In concrete terms, the 5th loop is the compound void. Look at it honestly, this is the engine of wealth. At the practical level, if you are trapped in the poverty cycle, you are probably standing on the wrong side of this equation. If you reduce it, you are paying compound interest. In practical terms, you have credit card debt at 20%. To put it plainly, you have car loans. As I see it, you have student loans. In financial life, the math is working against you. Put simply, every day you wake up, you are poorer than the night before, even if you did not spend a dime. If you strip it down, you are paddling upstream, and the current is stronger than your arms. Looked at soberly, the wealthy are on the other side. Look at the mechanics. They earn compound interest. In ordinary life, they own the S&P 500. Under that view, they own real estate. Under pressure, they own businesses. Seen clearly, every day they wake up richer than the night before, even if they slept all day. Seen up close, that is the snowball effect. In the real world, if you want to escape low income, you must stop being the person who pays interest and start becoming the person who earns it. At the working level, you must cross the line. If you look closely, how do you do that? In truth, you follow 3 stages of escape. At a practical level, stage 1 is survival. As a practical matter, this is where you stop the bleeding. From that angle, you cut expenses to the bone. If we are honest, you use your monk mode savings to pay off high-interest debt. At the center of it, you kill the vampire that is sucking your blood. At bottom, stage 2 is accumulation. In simple terms, this is where you start buying assets. At the household level, not a house you cannot afford. By that logic, not a car you cannot sustain. Stated another way, I mean productive ownership. When you look at it directly, take $10 a day, just $10, and put it into a low-cost index fund. Seen from the ground, ignore the noise. Plainly, ignore the flashy trends. Practically speaking, buy a piece of the economy and let it grow. In that light, you are building your own snowball. From there, it will look small at first. In real life, it will even look pathetic. From my perspective, you must trust the math. In daily life, stage 3 is freedom. In concrete terms, this is the moment when your assets generate enough cash flow or support to cover your basic survival needs. Look at it honestly, this is escape velocity. At the practical level, this is the moment you break the gravitational pull. If you reduce it, this is the moment you no longer have to sell your time just to stay alive. In practical terms, this is when you finally have options. To put it plainly, this is when you have dignity. As I see it, if I review the whole poverty cycle, I see the same 5 chains. In financial life, the scarcity tax. Put simply, the dopamine trap. If you strip it down, the linear income trap. Looked at soberly, the social gravity. Look at the mechanics, the compound void, in ordinary life. These are the chains that bind people. Under that view. But remember this. Under pressure, chains may be made of metal. Seen clearly, the strongest ones are forged in the mind. Seen up close, the door to the cage is not locked in the real world. The system wants you to stay inside. At the working level, your friends may want you to stay inside. If you look closely, your own fear certainly wants you to stay inside. In truth, but the physics can still work in your favor. At a practical level, you have the map. As a practical matter, you only need the courage to walk out. From that angle, that is one reason the trap feels so demoralizing. If we are honest, the person inside it is not only losing money. At the center of it, he is losing momentum. At bottom, and once momentum is lost, even a simple setback feels heavier than it should feel. A family that had almost started believing in progress suddenly has proof, at least emotionally, that progress is fragile. That emotional cost is part of the mathematics too. Discouragement changes behavior. Fear changes timing. Exhaustion changes judgment. All of those things make the next mistake more likely. In simple terms, that is one reason I see it this way. Poverty should be discussed with more precision. At the household level, people talk about it morally when they should often talk about it mechanically. By that logic, the poor are not always losing because they refuse to move. Stated another way, very often they are losing because the slope is steeper than outsiders imagine, because their margin for error is smaller than outsiders imagine, and because the price of one mistake is larger than outsiders imagine. When you look at it directly, when you finally see that, Clearly, a lot of cheap advice starts to sound cheap. Seen from the ground, the line that poverty is expensive is not rhetoric. Plainly, it is description. Practically speaking, it means the household without cash reserve is forced into bad timing over and over again. It means the household that could not afford durable quality is sentenced to repeated replacement. It means the person who could not afford the larger package pays more per heat, more per ounce, more per month, and more per year. It means weakness is not only painful, weakness is billable. In that light, for that reason, a cash buffer matters so much. From there, most people hear the phrase emergency fund and think it sounds small. In real life, I see it this way: the first reserve is one of the biggest psychological upgrades a household can buy. From my perspective, $1,000 does not solve all of life. It does something more foundational than that. It interrupts panic. It reduces the number of decisions that have to be made from fear. It gives the household one precious ability that poor households often lack. It gives them the ability to pause in daily life. That pause changes everything. In concrete terms, a person who can pause can compare. Look at it honestly: a person who can compare can choose. At practical level, a person who can choose can finally act like a planner instead of a victim of the next interruption. If you reduce it, and that is how the scarcity tax begins losing some of its power. In practical terms, the cycle of poverty is not broken in one leap. To put it plainly, it is weakened chain by chain. As I see it, the dopamine trap is weakened the same way. In financial life, I see it this way: many people underestimate how humiliating a trapped life can feel. When a person feels overlooked long enough, the desire to buy some visible symbol of worth becomes very strong. A nice object can feel like a correction. It can feel like proof that you are not invisible. It can feel like evidence that you are not losing. This is why this kind of spending can look irrational to outsiders and still feel emotionally necessary to the buyer. Put simply, but necessity is not the same as usefulness. If you strip it down, that is where discipline enters. Looked at soberly, discipline is not mainly self-punishment. Discipline is choosing not to let a temporary emotional need become a long-term financial wound. It is choosing not to buy one evening of relief with 2 years of monthly obligations. It is choosing not to let identity be rented from brands, financed cars, and little performances of status. Look at the mechanics. And that is why monk mode can be so powerful. In ordinary life, it is not only about cutting costs. Under that view, it is about changing the source of reward. Under pressure, if the brain can stop celebrating the shopping bag and start celebrating the growing reserve, then the whole inner economy shifts. Savings starts feeling satisfying. Debt reduction starts feeling satisfying. Simplicity starts feeling satisfying. Once that happens, the market loses one of its easiest ways to manipulate a person. Seen clearly, the linear income trap has a similar cruelty. Seen up close, it flatters effort while quietly exhausting the worker. In the real world, a person can feel honorable because he is working nonstop and still be losing ground in real terms. That makes the trap emotionally deceptive. The worker feels productive. The household feels stretched. Both things are true at once. The effort is real. The result is weak. That is exactly why the equation has to be changed. At the working level, the skill stack is not just a career trick. If you look closely, it is a survival strategy. In truth, it is how a person increases the value of the hour without increasing the number of hours forever. It is how a worker begins to convert labor into leverage. It is how income begins to rise without demanding a matching increase in exhaustion. Once that shift starts, the household finally gains room to do something more than merely endure. A practical level, that room is precious. As a practical matter, because room is what allows ownership. From that angle, without room, all money is spoken for before it even arrives. If we are honest with room, a little capital can finally be directed toward an asset instead of toward another emergency. At the center of it, and then the compounding equation starts to change. At bottom, the social gravity section matters because almost no one climbs alone. In simple terms, a person may understand the math perfectly and still be dragged backward by the emotional pressure of a weak environment. If everyone near you mocks discipline, then discipline begins to feel like arrogance. If everyone near you worships appearances, then a plain life begins to feel like failure, even when it is financially wise. This is why the environment around the mind has to be treated as part of the budget. Bad inputs create bad decisions, just as surely as high-interest debt does. At the household level, a better tribe does not always arrive immediately in physical form. By that logic, sometimes it begins as a reading habit. Stated another way, sometimes it begins as a voice in an interview. When you look at it directly, sometimes it begins as a biography that gives a person a more mature standard than the one available in the room around him. Seen from the ground, that may sound abstract. Plainly, it is not abstract. Practically speaking, inputs become thoughts. In that light, thoughts become standards. From there, standards become behavior. In real life, behavior becomes outcomes. From my perspective, that is one reason better ideas are not a luxury purchase. They are part of the escape plan. In daily life, then finally, the household reaches the compound void. In concrete terms, this is where everything either starts helping or keeps hurting. A family that keeps paying 20% interest is not simply servicing debt. It is feeding a machine that gets stronger while the family sleeps. A family that begins even the smallest habit of buying productive holdings is not merely investing. It is beginning to move to the better side of a machine that also gets. Look at it honestly. And that is why stage 1 matters. At the practical level, this is why stage 2 matters. If you reduce it, that is one reason stage 3 matters. In practical terms, people want freedom first because freedom is the most attractive word. To put it plainly, but room rests on survival and accumulation the way a roof rests on walls. If the walls are not there, the roof is fantasy. Survival means the household stops leaking. Accumulation means the household finally starts owning. Freedom means enough ownership exists that labor is no longer the only pillar holding up the whole life, as I see it. In my view, many people become impatient right there. In financial life, they want the snowball to look impressive too early. Put simply, but snowballs are never impressive in the beginning. If you strip it down, they are only impressive to people who understand what repetition can do. $10 a day looks absurd to a person who worships spectacle. It looks serious to a person who understands compounding. The same is true of debt reduction. Small progress looks boring in the month it is made. Over years, boring progress becomes a different life. Looked at soberly, for that reason, the final summary matters so much. Look at the mechanics. The scarcity tax drains the brain. In ordinary life, the dopamine trap drains the wallet. Under that view, the linear income trap drains time. Under pressure, the social gravity drains ambition. Seen clearly, the compound void drains the future. Seen up close. Once a person sees these chains clearly, his problems stop looking random. The loop becomes visible. And when the loop becomes visible, the exit begins to look real. In the real world, that does not mean the exit is easy. At the working level, it means the exit is intelligible. If you look closely, and once a person has a map, a real map, he no longer has to confuse motion with progress. He can start applying force in the right places. In truth, for that reason, I would always choose clarity over comfort. At practical level, comfort without clarity keeps people trapped. As a practical matter, clarity, even when it hurts, gives a person the chance to build the force required for escape. From that angle, in the end, the real victory is not simply having more money. If we are honest, it is standing outside the loop, at the center of it. It is looking at life and knowing one bill cannot destroy the month. At bottom, it is knowing one employer cannot destroy the year. In simple terms, it is knowing that time, once the enemy, has finally become an ally. At the household level, that is what orbit means in ordinary life. By that logic, that is what escape velocity buys. Stated another way, And that is why I would say this subject matters far more than most people realize.